Here's some of the top stories we're watching this week. We'll get a health check on the UK economy when a raft of economic data is published. Southern African leaders are set to meet for a planned summit that comes amid a disputed election in Zimbabwe. And how are insurance companies faring? We'll find out when several insurance companies report their results. We'll start in the UK, where on Tuesday, labour market and productivity statistics for June will be released. While recent wage growth figures have come in below market expectations, a fall in the number of hours worked by full-time employees has provided a bit of a boost to growth and output per hour. All of this data will be closely watched since it comes just after the Bank of England raised interest rates to 0.75%. On Wednesday, we'll find out if domestic inflation is on the rise when inflation figures for July are released. And finally, on Thursday, retail sales data will tell us how strong spending growth has been in July, following robust sales in the second quarter of this year with big events such as the World Cup. But of course, we can't talk about the UK economy without mentioning one big thing: Brexit. Here's Laura Hughes for an update on where we are with the Brexit negotiations.
This summer we're seeing a huge charm offensive from Theresa May and her cabinet of Brexit officials as she tries to put off the possibility of a no-deal Brexit. Why are we suddenly worrying about that? Well, we saw her white paper Chequers agreement and we had lots of anger from Conservative MPs, and we've also had a mixed reception from Brussels. So over the next few weeks, while Theresa May is on holiday, you can be sure that diplomats from Britain will be out over in Brussels trying to convince the EU to give us a fair hearing and give Theresa May a chance to get her Brexit deal over the line before she puts it in front of MPs in October. There's still many hurdles to come, trying to stamp out things like the no-deal possibility and also the Irish border issue, which could stall any sort of agreement.
Now to Africa, where Southern African nations are set to gather for a two-day summit in Namibia. Leaders from the Southern African Development Community, or SADC, which includes South Africa, Angola, and Zimbabwe, among others, will meet in the capital of Windhoek to address the key issues facing the region. The 15-member organization is overseeing a swath of upcoming elections in the region, but is currently preoccupied by the disputed election in Zimbabwe. Although President Emmerson Mnangagwa was declared the winner, the opposition Movement for Democratic Change is contesting the result. Violence has intensified since the July 31st election, undermining the prospects for a peaceful transition in the country's first election since an army coup last year ended Robert Mugabe's decades-long rule over Zimbabwe. Here's Joe Sinclair, who was in Zimbabwe during the vote.
Even before the election, opposition leader Nelson Chamisa was saying that SADC wanted to see blood on the streets before it would take action against alleged rigging. Well, we've had the poll and we've seen the blood. First, soldiers opened fire, shooting dead at least 6 protesters on the streets of Harare and injuring scores of others. Since then, MDC members and independent activists have accused security forces of stepping up violent reprisals. Nelson Chamisa continues to dispute the result. President Emmerson Mnangagwa says Zimbabwe is open for business. But billions of US dollars of international investment hangs on whether these elections are considered free and fair. The question then is, how will the international community react?
And finally, in the corporate world, we'll hear from some of the UK's biggest insurance companies this week. Admiral and Esure are both due to report their results for the first half of the year. The first half of this year was an expensive one for insurers, with bad weather, particularly the cold spell referred to as the Beast from the East in February and March, which caused a surge in home insurance claims. But investors will also be paying attention to what the companies have to say about the car insurance market. Here's our insurance correspondent Oliver Ralph to explain why.
So there's some really interesting short-term and long-term trends in the car insurance market at the moment. In the short term, a lot of car insurers recently have said that claims costs are rising. Part of that's because cars are different. They might be safer now, there are fewer accidents, but when accidents do happen, they cost more to repair because there's so many electronics in the bumpers and the wing mirrors that quite often need repairs. It will also be interesting to watch out for what they say about the long-term future of their industry. There's a lot of worries about what happens to car insurance in an age of driverless cars. Do ordinary people still buy car insurance policies like they do now? Or will car insurance be something that big manufacturers buy because it might be their products that are going wrong? If that's the case, what does the future hold for smaller car insurance companies?
And that's what the week ahead looks like from the Financial Times in London.